I'm going to go ahead and refresh the browser window. And now you can see we actually have that first image loaded. It's actually centered on our page just like we'd set up. And we've got our text above and below. And we actually have the text for that particular image being displayed. Haven't formatted yet, but that's coming next or soon. Now let's go ahead and set up our other images. I'm going to come down right below that image we just set up, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to say slide nth child number 2. So now we're looking at that second div. And I'm going to give it a travel underscore 2. Everything else is the same other than the image itself. I'm going to do the same thing for image number 3. So I'm going to come down right below that, put in image number 3. I'm going to come down right below that and put in image number 4. And I'm going to come down right below that and put in image number 5. So now I've got all 5 images inside my browser. Let's go ahead and save all those changes. And again, they're set up as a film strip. They're edge to edge. If I had hidden the overflow, in fact, I could actually show you that by just going ahead and I'm going to rim that out for 1 second. Let's go ahead and save that change. Let me go back and go down here so you can actually get the images in. Good time to pause if you want to type those in. I'm going to refresh the browser window just so you can see what I mean by the film strip effect. The fact that I'm hiding the overflow is the fact that you can't see this film strip, but this goes all the way across. It's like one long film strip that we've actually set up here. I'm going to go back now and bring in that overflow hidden again, just so that we don't see that, because we actually don't want to see it for our slideshow, but that's what I meant when I said I'm setting them up similar to a film strip. Save the change. Let's refresh the browser window, and that other image should disappear, which it did, because we're hiding the overflow. It's not really gone, it's just hidden. It's hidden from view. Now comes the fun part. First thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and format this text. Let's go ahead and set the text up so that it appears in the way I demonstrated in the earlier video. So I'm going to go ahead and add some formatting or some styling to that text. I'm going to go back into my main.css file. Right below my images, I'm going to set up slide text class. And again, we're addressing the class now that's assigned to the paragraph tags themselves for our image or for our text. I'm saying margin top 400 pixels. So I'm setting it 400 pixels from the top of the image. And again, I played with this number to get it positioned where I wanted to. Depending upon the size of your images, you may have to adjust yours, but it's actually going to adjust that 400 pixels from the top of the image. I'm going to give it a padding top and bottom of 10 pixels to give myself a wider white gap or white space. 5 pixels left and right to keep it off the edges of the image just in the event I have a lot of text. I've given it a background color of white, but I'm using RGBA because I actually want a transparency to that. So I'm saying 255, 255, 255, 0.8, so it's 80% transparent. The color of the text is going to be pound or octothorpe 000. That's going to give me a black text. I'm going to align the text in the center of that particular text box that we've just built, and I want the font size to be 1 rem. I had M down there. We actually should start using rems because now with the changes to CSS, everybody's referencing rems because it's the root size, so it's no longer inherited based on the parent element, but it's based on the root itself. And it's actually it's a lot better to size your items that way, whether it be text or anything else that we're sizing. It's based on the root element instead of the actual parent element. I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes. Good time to pause if you want to type that in. I'm going to go into my browser window, refresh, and now we should have our nice formatted text with that nice translucent white box at the bottom that actually shows the text that we have in that paragraph element. Now comes the fun part. Now we actually start adding the animation. We set up an animation sequence at the top of our CSS file where we actually set up the slide wrapper. And again, the slide wrapper is referring to this div that encompasses all of our slides. But we actually set that up. We gave it a width and we said your animation is going to be a slide effect. You're going to wait 30 seconds. It's going to be linear, which means it's going to be even from start to finish. And it's going to be an infinite loop. But we actually haven't started that yet because we actually haven't set up our keyframes. That's what we're getting ready to do now. And this is where the magic comes in for doing this. I'm actually going to copy this so you don't have to watch me type it. But I'm going to come right down below my slide text and I'm going to put this in place. Let me go ahead and take out these comment tags. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually setting up keyframes. And I'm getting a 10% margin left, 0 pixels, 20% 650, 30% 650. What these are the width of the actual image itself. And I've got a starting and a stopping point based on the percentage. That's why you see them in there twice. It's 20 and 30% is 650, 40 and 50 is 1300, 60 and 70 is 1950, and 80 and 90 is 2650. And what I've done is I've taken 650 and added it. That's where I've gotten these 1950s and 2600s and 650s. And the way I got this is I actually divided this into 100% of the actual number. How many pictures do I have? That's why I used 5 pictures to start with, because it's a very easy number to work with. Because when you divide 5 into 100, it's going to be 20%. So it's pretty easy. 20, 40, 60, 80, and then the last one's 100 where it actually loops back. And the 10 is the actual beginning point for that one. So it begins at 10, goes 20, this one goes 30 to 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and then 90 and 100 is the last. When I save these changes, good time for you to pause to get the keyframes in. And don't worry, we're actually going to do another one with seven images so you can actually see that sometimes you play with the numbers to get the things the way you want it to animate. Save the changes, good time to pause to get everything typed in. I'm going to go ahead and refresh our browser window, and we should actually now have a working slideshow. In 30 seconds, we should actually see the linear slide of that image slide over as image number 2 comes into play. All right, let's go ahead and get this closing brace put in, because without that closing brace, nothing's going to work. Let's go ahead and save the changes. And there, now we can actually see our slideshow sliding based on our keyframes. What's going to be interesting here is you're actually going to see as we get to the end of this 5 slides what I was talking about earlier about this film strip. And again, because I set this up originally to do 7 images and I wanted you to see how we do 7 and now we can do 5, you can actually see I got this nice rolling effect going back. But we got this nice animated view of these images as they go through this particular slideshow. And again, no JavaScript was used for any of this. This is strictly HTML, CSS, which is actually very cool. You can actually set up the duration of the slides right up here inside this linear setup. I actually have this set to 30 seconds right now. If I actually set it at 10 and save those changes, it would be much quicker. Let me go ahead and refresh the browser window, and it's going to go through much faster now based on that 10-second setting. I'm going to go back and set this to 20. That's a little bit too quick. And I also want to set this to ease in, ease out, because there's a bunch of different settings we can have here. And again, you can find out all these settings inside the CSS W3C or the MDM network. There are a bunch of different settings we can have for this particular animation property inside CSS. Now we actually have it set to ease in, ease out, so it's going to go a little bit slower at the top, a little bit slower at the end, kind of slow down as it gets to the middle. And that's the ease in, ease out effect. We can actually have an ease in effect. Again, just ease in. So it'll ease in, then it gets to the slide, and then stays at the same speed concurrently till it gets to the end and then goes to the next slide. And again, all based on the settings that we use inside of CSS. So it's got some very cool effects. What I do want to show you next is I want to show you how we can add some additional images. I set this up for 5 because these numbers, as I calculated the numbers for the keyframes, relatively easy because 5 goes into 100 pretty simply, but we don't have to have 5 images. Let me show you what I mean. All right, so let's suppose I wanted to have 7 images instead of 5. And again, I'm using 7 just because it's a nice odd number and it's going to make it a little more difficult to figure out these percentages. I'm going to come right down below where we had our last image installed, and I'm actually going to put in 2 additional images. And I'll bet you that's the reason, you probably guessed why I had 2 additional images inside my images folder. So I'm going to go ahead and copy 2 additional images. I'm going to come right below where we did our 5th image. I'm going to put in the 6th one. And again, I'm just going to clean up my formatting. This is going to be traveling the canals. Was quite an experience. And actually it was. It was quite beautiful. And I'm going to put in 1 more additional image. And when you are traveling the canals, this is the way to go. So you can pretty much guess what these images are going to be about, right? Since everything is travel here. I'm going to go ahead and take out these blank spaces. Good time to pause if you want to type in those last 2. Let me go put a gap in here so you can see what we actually added. Those last 2 images that we just added. I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes. Now we need to make a little bit of additions to our CSS code. So I'm going to go back into the main.css because my keyframes, I'm going to go ahead and remark this out so you don't lose it, just in the event you've downloaded these files. And I'm going to go ahead and change the CSS for my keyframes completely. I'm actually going to use a different set of keyframes that I had set up just for the event I used 7 images. So I'm going to come right down below where I set my slide text. I'm going to say keyframe slide 6.25, 12.5. Now we're using the same thing with my 650. But you'll notice now, because I've got 7 images, I've actually taken that 100% and I've divided it by 14. And again, because I wanted that start and stop, I've actually divided it by my 7 images, which would give me 14. I add 2, one for the beginning, one for the end, so it's going to be 16. It's going to come to 6.25%. That's where I'm getting these values from. I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes. Good time for you to pause if you want to get those in, because that's what's going to trigger our keyframes. Now when I go back into my document, refresh my browser window, now instead of having 5 images, we're going to have 7. And again, because we have the 7 images and because of the way we've got the timing set up, they seem to be running a little faster. So I'm actually going to go in and change that. And I didn't grab those last 2 images for some reason. Let me go see what happened there. I am going to go, first I'm going to adjust this timing because it's a little bit too quick. I'm going to set this back to 30. I'm going to save that change. We didn't bring in, that's what I didn't do. I didn't bring in the images for number 6 and 7. Because I'm a knucklehead, I've got to go add those also. So I'm going to come right down below my slide class. Now I'm going to add an nth child 6 for the 6th image, and I'm going to come down right below that. I'm going to add another one. I'm going to add the 7th image. So I'm going to change that to nth child 7th, and I'm going to change this to treble_7. Now I'm going to go and save all those changes. So not only did I have to make the changes in my HTML document, I'd forgotten all about making the links to the images in my CSS file. So I've changed the images in the CSS file to add the additional 2 images. I've changed my keyframes, and we've changed and added 2 additional divs to support those images inside the HTML document. I'm going to go ahead and save everything. Let's go back into our HTML or browser window. Let's refresh the browser window, and now we should have a nice same slideshow, but now instead of 5 images we have 7. And again, I figured out the keyframes by taking our total number of images. I know that I want to start and a stop, so I multiply that by 2. Gives me 14. Then I want one at the beginning and one at the end. It's kind of like my slide space, so I've actually divided by 16. You don't have to have the slide space. I just kind of put it in there because it keeps things flowing rather smoothly. Plus I get this nice little rollback. It rolls it back to the beginning. That wouldn't be there. I could actually, if I pulled that out and went right to 100%, it would actually just flash right back to number 1. So if you wanted to remove that rollback, you could actually change that setting, and instead of using 16, use 14, and it would actually go to the end of the slides, and then the number 1 image would just reappear. I kind of like that rollback feature, so I actually always add 1 to the beginning and 1 to the end of my calculations for the keyframes. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. It's kind of cool. I mean, up to a couple of years ago, we weren't able to do anything like this unless we used a plugin and some JavaScript. Now, because of the new properties inside CSS, we can do a lot of these things with pure HTML, CSS, and nothing else. So again, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you visit the website. We've got a lot of cool tutorials on the site, a lot of new tutorial sets on the site for those big projects that you're looking to do. And I look forward to seeing you on the website.